Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 108. Guys, thank you so much for joining us again. Calm before the storm. We have a lot to talk about this week. As always, Supergirl trailer and starting to ramp up our coverage of Stranger Things as well as we head to the finale of the show. But again, calm before the storm. Next week, we'll definitely be talking about Avatar Fire and Ash. And potentially, that won't even be the headliner. Potentially, we'll have an Avengers Doomsday trailer to talk about next week. So get excited for that. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But guys, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode. It is always a pleasure to join you. And thank you guys so much. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like and let me know what you think about any of the topics in the comments down below. And if you're interested in the audio-only platform, Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts, that is where the podcast is uploaded in full, the entire hour-ish of the podcast on Saturday mornings in the United States time. So check it out there, and then the podcast is uploaded in full on Mondays, usually on YouTube as well. Guys, that will do it for the intro. Pretty quick intro, pretty standard. Let's get into today's topics. Alrighty, guys, bit of an impromptu decision here. Let's take some time to talk about Stranger Things. And to be honest with you, the reason I didn't decide to do this, because I probably would have decided to do this anyways, but the reason I didn't is because I kind of put myself in a little bit of a bind. I'd wanted to rewatch Stranger Things leading up to Stranger Things Season 5, because I'd done that for the last season. But, I watched Stranger Things 1 through 3 when I think about a year and a half before season 4 came out, or maybe a couple years. Actually, it was in 2020 when I watched Stranger Things seasons 1 through 3. So I think right after season 3 came out, maybe less than a year after season 3 came out. And I was, I fell in love. I loved the show. I loved season 3. I thought it was great. And at that point, I was just in anticipation of season 4, like everyone else was. And I did a couple more rewatches. It was 2020. It was during the pandemic. I was like, I'm going to, I saw the show a few more times at that point. So I rewatched it many times. And then as season 4 was happening, I did a full rewatch of seasons 1 through 3 leading up to season 4, which was a whole lot of fun. So I kind of thought, maybe I should do that. I should do the same thing for season 5. But things got busy. We've been doing the daily segments. I've been, doing other things and watching other movies. And by the time I kind of realized, oh, wait a second, Stranger Things 5 is coming out in a month, I just was kind of out of time. Or so I thought. Well, I am still kind of out of time. At the very least, I'm out of time probably to watch all 4 seasons of Stranger Things before season 5 comes out in the first volume. But by the time the second volume comes out, I think we'll get there. Because I am normally not somebody who binges shows. I try to moderate. I try to watch maybe a few episodes, like 2 to 3 of a longer show, maybe like 4 to 5 of a sitcom at any given time, even on weekends. I'm like, just not my style to really just go and watch entire seasons of shows in one go. It's just not what I like. But I haven't been doing that with Stranger Things, but I will say the appeal, I totally forgot how easy it is just to go next episode, because this show is it's amazing to me. So I've been accelerating through this rewatch. I just kind of put on the first episode. I was like, why not? Let's just watch the first episode. And I just fell right back into it again. So we're barreling down this path, taking a small little break here from the Defender Saga rewatch just to do this, because I think I'll either in this episode or another episode we'll be talking about Luke Cage season 2. And then after that, I haven't started Iron Fist season 2 because I'm just full Stranger Things for now. And so we'll just be doing this for a little while. Again, I don't think I'll make it through all 4 seasons before November 26th, which is when Volume 1 comes out. But by Christmas, I think we'll get there. I'm pretty sure we'll get there. So look forward to that. Anyways, that's a whole lot of background. We're here to talk about Stranger Things Season 1 because I have watched Stranger Things Season 1 for the 4th, 5th, 6th time. I don't even remember. But let's talk about it. I think it's going to be fun to reminisce on Stranger Things seasons 1 through 4 as the 5th season is coming out. So let's just dive right in. I totally forgot how good this first season was, because everybody, I think that while sometimes people say, Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars and Stranger Things season 1 is the best season. You're kind of like, yeah, but does everyone just say that for saying that? And then you rewatch those and you're like, oh, Empire is the best one. In my opinion, at least. I know some people disagree. Totally fine. And you rewatch Stranger Things season 1, you go, oh, season 1 is amazing. I don't know if it's the best one. I have to rewatch season 4. Spoiler alert, I guess. Not for the show, but for my rewatch. I am about halfway through season 2. It's not as good, in my opinion. I'm still really enjoying it. But yeah, not as good as season 1, because season 1 is just awesome. Like, one of the things I've always said about Stranger Things, one of the things that they got so incredibly right was the casting. The casting is incredible. I mean, the fact that they were able to take these kids, anytime you take a series or a show or a movie and you have a group of kids, right? Not even just kids, right? Because it's amazing in itself. I think that they nailed Steve and Jonathan and Nancy, especially given where those characters end up in season 4. By the time you get to season 4 and season 5, it's amazing. I mean, we could spend hours and hours talking about how incredible the Steve redemption arc is throughout the course of Stranger Things. It's amazing. But the fact that they got those teenagers right, amazing. The fact that they got, 4 or 5 kids who were like 10, 11, 12, and they nailed that casting, but that they're still so iconic with their roles, and by the time we're getting to season 5, they're still there, and you add more like Max and Erica by the time you get to season 5, it's incredible. Finn Wolfhard, Gaten Matarazzo, Caleb McLaughlin, Noah Schnapp, and of course Millie Bobby Brown. Just the chemistry, the way that they interact with each other. Of course they're kids, so of course the dialogue is not going to be, read out and acted in a Shakespearean kind of way. It's totally fine. They're endearing. Their relationship is great. The writing more than makes up for any of those sort of quote-unquote deficiencies, if you will. Again, child acting is child acting, and we should not expect Oscar performances from any given child actor. It's just they're kids, right? Can you imagine trying to do anything to that caliber when you're 11 years old, no pun intended? Crazy. Right, just crazy stuff. So yeah, I mean, just the fact that they were able to do what they were able to do and grow up in that way is unbelievable. And I think that even though I don't love season 2 as much, again, we'll talk about that another time, maybe in a couple weeks, their performances elevate even throughout the show. Like, Noah Schnapp is given so much more to do in season 2, obviously, because he's kind of MIA in season 1, and he's awesome in season 2. His acting is awesome in season 2. But anyways, I love the acting in the show. That is what binds the show together, right? What I've said about TV shows for so long is that while in a movie you can get away with subpar characterizations and characters that you're not super attached to because it's 2 hours, it's 3 hours, you're like, I'll just watch the movie for what it is. A TV show asks you to invest days of your life, not literal 24-hour days, but just like multiple days that you're watching the show, and probably 4, 5, 6, 7, in the case of season 4 and season 5, 8, 9, 10 hours of your life to a show, and you have to be attached to these characters in a certain sense. So the fact that they were able to get you at the very beginning of this season, with Will, with Mike, just Will's disappearance in itself being such a gut-wrenching moment, even before you know that much about him as a kid, it's amazing what they were able to do. And speaking of Will's disappearance, I remembered Winona Ryder being great in Stranger Things. I could not believe, every time I rewatched the show, especially season 1, but season 2 as well, but season 1 in particular, her acting ability. And I think they've said it before, the actors, like Noah Schnapp has been like, yeah, it's amazing to see how she has to stay in that emotional state. Because it's one thing in the course of a movie, when you're filming a movie, I'm not an actor, so I don't know this, but from what I've seen, what I've heard in interviews, it's one thing to be emotionally distraught in one particular scene in a movie. It's another thing to be Joyce Byers, to play Joyce Byers as Winona Ryder did in season 1, and be devastated, emotionally distraught, and yet clinging to hope, hope beyond hope for the entire season. It is unbelievable what she was able to do. I just give her so many props for that. And I love David Harbour as well. I think that he's great as Hopper, and you forget how gut-wrenching those last few moments of season 1 are when he's thinking about his daughter having cancer, and as he's rescuing Will. It's just like these characters are written so well, even Steve in the season. Because, I mean, even though I know how much I love Steve as a character, the way that they write him early on, it is a testament to Joe Keery as an actor and the Duffer Brothers and all the other writers on the show, that I still found him despicable in the very early episodes. Slowly, as the season goes on, even before his eventual nails or bat with nails redemption at the end of season 1, even before that, you can start to see the cracks beginning to form on that bully and that that hardened exterior, if you will. But at the beginning of the show, I was like, oh my gosh, I despise this character. And that's me knowing how much I love Steve in later seasons, season 3, season 4. I mean, end of season 2, of course, but just love Steve as a character. So it's such a testament to how invested you get in these characters and how great it is. And also just the way that they're able to set this whole world up. Now, it's going to be really interesting to see how much of this mythology you can kind of tell was made up on the fly versus how much you think that they had planned out from the beginning. This is going to be a spoiler warning for the first 5 minutes of Stranger Things, which I've seen. It's been released on YouTube. And so if you don't want to know what happens the first 5 minutes of Stranger Things, then feel free to skip ahead maybe 30 seconds or so. But you see in those first 5 minutes of Stranger Things 5 that they're returning to this idea that Will was not necessarily taken by accident, and that for all we know that shadowy figure in the first few minutes of season 1 wasn't a Demogorgon. It could have very well been Vecna. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And it also plays to this idea at the very end that they're in the library rescuing Will, that Vecna was there. Vecna was watching this whole thing. And he wanted Will to be released for various reasons. So maybe that has to do with the Mind Flayer in season 2 and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, that's a little spoiler warning that is over in this second. But yeah, I mean, I think throughout the season, they do such a great job of also laying the groundwork for what this world is, who 11 is, but also not giving away everything so that by the time you get to season 4, which we'll get to obviously in a little bit, that you have room to grow with this character and understand where she came from. I think Matthew Modine is great as Brenner, and I think that the whole Hawkins lab thing is great. I also the mystery behind this season, because I think other seasons have bits of mystery, but this season is really a mystery. And Hopper doing detective work and slowly getting on board with what Joyce is doing or what Joyce is believing. Jonathan slowly understanding what's going on. His relationship with Nancy beginning to develop. It was just such a joy to watch season 1 again. I can't say enough good things about this season. And it blew up Netflix for a reason. I really think, yes, sometimes it is fun, and I don't know. Some people think it's fun. I don't think it's fun. But some people think it's fun to just hate on the popular thing. And by the time that, Stranger Things became so big, and yes, season 2 didn't live up to season 1, but I still think it's great. People were like, well, this show isn't that good anymore. And people didn't like season 3. That's fine. I think it's just, people like to hate on the popular thing. I love season 1. I think that it's amazing. I think it's great. If you have a chance to even rewatch season 1 alone, because I think season 1 in particular with Will, as Will is sort of the center of season 1, even though he's not on screen for very long, and he will, I think, become the center of season 5 again. I think it's worth rewatching just to see how that plays out. I don't know anything other than the first 5 minutes of season 5, but I'm very excited to find out. Guys, what do you think about Stranger Things season 1? Is this the best season? Look forward to, hopefully in consecutive weeks. I'm not promising that, but we'll see. Look forward to rewatches of season 2, 3, and 4. And of course, in the meantime, in between those, look forward to my thoughts on the first 4 episodes in volume 1 of Stranger Things season 5. Let me know what you think about season 1 in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, 7 episodes down, 1 to go. Let's talk about episode number 7 of the HBO Max show, It Welcome to Derry. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion, as we have been doing with every single other episode in the series. So if you have not seen episode 7 or any of the other previous episodes, make sure to save the segment, save the video, or save the podcast for later, and come back once you have. Otherwise, let's dive right in. Spoilers for It Welcome to Derry episode number 7. Well, it has not been a secret that I have been a little bit disappointed with this show thus far. It's kind of a similar feeling, I feel like, that I felt with Dune Prophecy, where the show had a lot of promise, and it was very ambitious, but it just didn't feel like it was cohering very well. And it's disappointing because It Welcome to Derry and Dune Prophecy both had good parts, good episodes, good storylines, good acting, good direction, but just never quite clicked for me, to be honest with you. And I say Dune Prophecy because it's another HBO show, HBO Max show that came out late last year, actually. Over a year ago, I want to say. So anyways, it's kind of similar vibes. But at any rate, It Welcome to Derry, I'm a fan of the It movies, but I'm not a fan of horror. But again, I've liked those It movies because I think that their story and characters and what they're trying to say are more interesting, that I can get over, some jump scares and some disturbing images. There have been definitely some disturbing images in these movies and this show. But I think overall I find this franchise pretty appealing and pretty interesting. So, the first 4 episodes, I think episode 1 so far, and I promise I'll stop doing, the recap pretty soon. We'll talk about episode 7, but just to set the stage, right? In case you are coming into this review having not heard my thoughts on the previous 6 episodes. But I liked episode 1, and I liked the twist at the end where the kids died, and you kind of thought, oh, this is the group of kids. Nope, it's not the group of kids. And then I think the show just kind of steadily started to meander a little bit more as we headed into episode 5. But I really liked episode 5. I thought, okay, it's a little bit too late in my opinion, but to really capture this momentum. But episode 5 was really good. But then episode 6 kind of just went right back to this random mishmash of storylines. I will say, right? Episode 7. Now we're in the second to last episode of the show. And I thought episode 7 was pretty much up there with episode 5. I think it is a very solid, very good episode of the show in a vacuum. Because while I think it is a very solid, very good episode of the show, or just good episode in general, I don't know how much it's going to salvage my overall thoughts of this show in general. What I liked about episode 7 was the way that it was structured, the way that it was paced, the tension and the action that was going on when the house was burning down, the imagery. I think this episode in a vacuum was quite well done. It's just that it feels like a really good episode for a show that it doesn't feel like it's a part of. And it's a bummer to me to say that kind of stuff, but it just feels like that is the case. First of all, I think this episode, it felt climactic, which we'll get to this in a second, but it felt climactic. It felt like this was what the show had been leading up to, right? That makeshift bar burning down. And it was really well shot. The smoke, the fire, the one takes, the long shots, and the people running through, and then Pennywise slipping in there and being just this horrific presence. All of that kind of stuff. It was great. It was captured super well, and it really made for a captivating episode. And I thought it was incredibly well done. I thought that it was a good thing to focus on that. I also, jumping back, I thought that the opening with Pennywise and the clown who eventually does become the moniker for Pennywise was really good as well. Did it feel kind of random? I mean, not random in the sense, random in the sense that, because the woman, and I forget her name, but the woman who is Pennywise's daughter, quote unquote daughter, she, I guess, was revealed to be that way, be such, at the end of the last episode. So I guess it kind of follows from that. But, it feels, it's a really long extended sequence. But I think in a vacuum, in isolation, it's a really interesting sequence of how Pennywise kind of captured that clown moniker. Although we don't know why he picked on this clown. He does say at one point when he was in the body of that kid, he says the kids seem to be attracted to you. So there is that, right? There is that kind of, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? Because if the kids are attracted to you and Pennywise likes to feed off of fear, then that makes sense why he picked the clown. So I thought that was all really good. And then it heads into the part where the house is on fire. I thought that stuff was really good. I thought, again, in isolation, the scene with Rich and Marge, where Rich sacrifices himself, really touching, quite moving, well acted by the kids. Did a really good and heartbreaking scene, right? I wish that I was a little bit more emotionally attached to these characters because it feels like this show has not given us enough time to be with these kids. One of the things about the first It movie, for example, is that you spent almost the entire movie with those kids. And so by the end of it, you're at the very least more invested in that story and those kids than you are, I think I am, with Lily or Marge or Will or Ronnie or Rich or any of those kids, right? So I feel like it's a shame because that scene was really well done, but it felt like it didn't really live up to the investment that they thought we were going to have in these storylines. All that stuff was good. I thought the scene between Pennywise and, I want to say Kirsch, Mrs. Kirsch, right? Really good scene. Although, one really big nitpick I have, and if anyone can explain this to me, please do. Like, I'm genuinely saying, if I just missed something outright and there is an actual explanation for this, please let me know. And I have since learned, right, or since remembered, because it's been a long time, honestly, since I've seen those two It movies, so forgive me, I just don't remember every single detail. But, anyways, I have since, I guess, remembered, I must have seen this scene in the movie, but that character, Mrs. Kirsch, was in those It movies. I think the second one is what I read. So she is a character that does recur. It's not a random new character, which is fine. But anyways, within this show, I think that scene was appropriately scary and creepy when she approaches Pennywise, except for the fact that so I get that she's like, he looks like my dad, right? Cause and to be fair, clowns used to be attractive to kids. I think pretty much today clowns are very universally seen as scary, so people don't really dress up as clowns anymore. But you know 1908 or whatever that year was in the prologue, you're like, okay, yeah, the kids like the clowns. And so, seen as a friendly face, and she would, see that makeup and everything and be like, oh, that's my dad, right? Because I think it is Bill Skarsgård playing both roles. So that's great. That makes sense to me. And she's like, I've been waiting for you. I wanted to see you. All that kind of stuff. And then, right, Pennywise being Pennywise and being freakish and horrifying starts eating someone's face. And I'm like, okay, that's Pennywise. And she's not fazed by it. That in itself, I think I bought it. I was like, okay, she's just, that's fine and all. And then 5 minutes later, she goes, you're not my dad. And I was like, wait a second. Hold on a second. You mean to tell me after watching this demonic creature eat somebody's face off, you didn't bat an eye? And then 5 minutes later, you're going, wait a second, you're not my dad. That felt ridiculous to me. So the whole sequence I thought was good until that last part where I was like, what are we doing? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's sort of a nitpick, I suppose, but it was so jarring because the whole episode I was pretty locked in until that moment, and I was like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. Anyways, I like the sequences at the end with the pillar and Hanlon, trying not to destroy the pillar, but now the pillar is destroyed, so it sets up Pennywise to come back. And I think that is the saving grace of this episode, because one of the big things about this episode, and it's not the episode's fault necessarily, it's more the placement of the episode within the show, this felt like the last episode of the season. The show felt like it was really winding down. Like Pennywise was like, bye, I'm going to hibernate again for 27 years. And the people were like, hey, see you in 27 years. And it was like, okay, I guess that's it. And I did a double take. I looked it up in the middle of the show. I was like, are there 7 episodes? No, there are 8 episodes. So then it makes a little bit of sense why, Pennywise comes back, although he has to go back into hibernation again at some point. So I don't know what the mechanics of that are, because the artifact looked like it was burned, whatever. I feel like, though, it was just odd because the whole episode really was paced like, oh, this is the end, this is the big climax, this is everything, and now Pennywise is gone. So I don't know what episode 8 has in store for it. I don't think it's episode 7's fault in itself. And I think, again, it speaks to sort of that paradigm that you're seeing with episode 7 of this show. In isolation, this is a really good episode, I think, at least. I enjoyed a lot of what I saw in this episode from just a story perspective and a character perspective. Its placement within the show, its place within the show, though, is, I think, shoddy at best. And it's not its fault, but I just feel like it's sort of the idea that it's just too little too late. And it also made some interesting choices of really setting itself up to be almost like a last episode and then not really paying that off. So those are some quick thoughts on episode 7 of It Welcome to Derry. I don't know what to expect from episode 8, just because I guess Pennywise, I saw a little bit of a teaser at the end. I guess Pennywise takes Will and whatnot. I don't know, because I feel like I was set up as an audience member to really feel like episode 7 was the last episode as it was going along. That now episode 8 is just going to almost feel tacked on is my worry, but we'll have to see. Next week is the last episode. We'll kind of do a little bit of a broader picture, big picture, spoiler discussion, of course, as well as talking about episode 8. And then we'll kind of wrap up our coverage of It Welcome to Derry when that comes out. So guys, what did you think about episode 7 of It Welcome to Derry? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, couple of very interesting little tidbits for some upcoming Marvel movies that we have to talk about today. First of all, just a little bit of an interesting nugget here. It's not going to be really the main topic of this segment. I didn't think it was necessarily just big enough news. Surprise, expected cast member that we thought was going to be in Avengers Secret Wars is in Avengers Secret Wars, but still, it's interesting enough. So let's talk about first, before we get to the Punisher and all of that stuff from John Bernthal, let's get into the fact that Letitia Wright, who of course plays Shuri, aka the Black Panther, currently in the MCU, will be returning for Avengers Secret Wars. Again, I would have said this about any character that's in the Doomsday cast, Simu Liu, Pedro Pascal, who I think we know is in Avengers Secret Wars, but all those things, I would have said it about Vanessa Kirby, any of those characters. They're like, oh yeah, I'll be heading, to film Avengers Secret Wars next, because that's what Letitia Wright said. She said the next thing she's going to be shooting is Avengers Secret Wars. So surprise, surprise, a character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially a character who is in Avengers Doomsday, going to be in Avengers Secret Wars. But I still think it's cool. We're still getting to know the cast of Avengers Secret Wars. I think that it's going to be interesting to see which missing players from Doomsday appear in Secret Wars. So probably Doctor Strange. We know Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be in Secret Wars. I'm assuming that Tom Holland is going to show up in Secret Wars. Captain Marvel, Bruce Banner, all these different characters. But yeah, it's great to see. And also Sadie Sink we talked about a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I think it's cool. And we'll have to see who else fills out the cast of Secret Wars. And I'm sure we'll get more insight. I'm going to guess we're going to get a cast announcement probably at Comic-Con next year, along with the Doomsday trailer. So yeah, should be good. Let's get on to the main segment here though, because there are a lot of quotes from Punisher or from John Bernthal about the Punisher special presentation that I think are very interesting and actually might change a couple things about the way that I am looking at least the release order of these two properties. So he was giving an interview via Screen Rant about promoting his new Netflix show called His and Hers. And he had this to say, John Bernthal, who plays Frank Castle, aka Punisher. He says, quote, back up. He was asked when the Disney Plus presentation is going to release, right? Again, we had previously talked about the fact that the Punisher special presentation was going to connect to Spider-Man Brand New Day. It's not like the TV and movie sites are going to be completely disconnected, like we had maybe thought before, at least I had kind of thought before. And this is what he had to say. He said, quote, around that same time, there will also be this Punisher special that's coming out that I think will be as high-octane Punisher as you have ever seen. So talking about the release date, it's going to be releasing around the same time as Spider-Man Brand New Day. He continues, quote, I think what was really important to me and to Destin Daniel Cretton, and to Tom Holland, is that we believed that the Punisher could walk off of the Spider-Man set and could walk onto the special set. And I do believe that we achieved that. So, interestingly enough, and maybe this was a faulty assumption of mine that I just hadn't even considered before, in all the things that I had been talking about, I thought, okay, so I talked about a couple weeks ago, Punisher is not going to be in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. That's fine. He leaves the prison and he goes off and does his own thing. That's totally great. I had thought, though, okay, so then post-prison break, he's going to do his special presentation. He's going to, discover something about himself as a character, and then he's going to wreak havoc in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now it looks like, though, it actually looks like it's the opposite. If I'm reading this quote right here, he says, it's important that the Punisher could, quote, walk off of the Spider-Man set and could walk onto the special set. Notice, and maybe we're reading too much into this, but notice how he doesn't say could walk off of the special set and could walk onto the Spider-Man set. This indicates that the direct line of sight is going from Daredevil Born Again Season 1 post-credit scene where he escapes from that prison that Wilson Fisk has. Then he goes straight into Spider-Man Brand New Day, which again would really seem to hint at a lot of connections between Daredevil and Spider-Man Brand New Day, but we'll see about that. And then he will go into his special presentation. And assuming that goes well and everything like that, he might then just walk right on to Daredevil Born Again Season 3, which might be coming out in 2027. We don't know. So interesting, right? It's very interesting. Again, does it affect a whole lot? Not really. It just kind of changes my perception of, I thought the Punisher special presentation would be coming out between Daredevil Born Again Season 1 and Spider-Man Brand New Day. So I thought maybe April, maybe May. But now it looks like probably right after the movie Spider-Man Brand New Day. It might actually almost work out in such a way where it's like, hey, you watched Spider-Man Brand New Day. Presumably you loved it, because I think we all will, I hope. And presumably you thought Punisher was cool. Now check out his special presentation on Disney Plus. I feel like that's pretty clever and smart, honestly, on a marketing and watch time kind of point of view. So that's good. More people watching it, I think is good. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Spider-Man Brand New Day affects what he's up to in his own special presentation. So anyways, guys, couple little bits of Marvel news here to talk about. But yeah, I think it's interesting. What do you guys think of the news of Black Panther, Shuri returning for Avengers Secret Wars, and Punisher, the special presentation probably taking place after Spider-Man Brand New Day? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, a little late to the party, but better late than never. Let's talk about the latest Disney animation movie, Zootopia 2. This review, I get it, I'm a little bit late. I just didn't have time to check it out once it came out during Thanksgiving, was busy with family, but we're here to talk about it. I've finally seen it. And so, going to talk about it in non-spoilery detail and then some spoilers, but this is going to be a little bit of a shorter review just because hopefully you guys have had a chance to see it by now. So I'm just going to give my quick thoughts and then we will move on from there. So again, non-spoiler and then spoilers. I will clearly delineate when these spoilers begin. Zootopia 2. Zootopia 1 is interesting because I actually hadn't seen it. I didn't see it when it first came out. So I caught up to it much, much, much later. And it was interesting because it's one of those movies where it gets this incredible amount of hype. And I think simply just by nature of the fact that it made $1 billion, there was so much curiosity around this movie for me of, everyone who I've talked to who's seen Zootopia 1 said they really liked it, but nobody has said, oh, this is my favorite movie ever, things like that. A similar case study for Disney was Moana. And I think Moana, there are a lot of people that I know who are like, oh, Moana is one of my favorite Disney movies ever. I love the movie, blah, blah, blah. So that one I get why it became such a cultural phenomenon. Not that I didn't get Zootopia 1, but it made $1 billion and it was this huge, massive hit. And flash forward ahead to 2025, Zootopia 2 made $500 million worldwide in its first weekend, which is crazy, right? So it's clear that there is something about Zootopia that has captivated audiences. I really liked the first one. I was surprised at how much I liked it. Again, I didn't find myself in that camp of, oh, this is my favorite movie of all time, but I did enjoy the movie. So I was pretty excited to eventually check out Zootopia 2, although again, it wasn't on the top of the priority list next to Wake Up Dead Man and next to Wicked for Good during the Thanksgiving window, but finally got a chance to see it. And I feel like this series of movies is good. I think that while you can kind of see between the first and the second movie how they are kind of poking at this formula, and if they make a Zootopia 3, which, guess what? This movie's going to make $1 billion again, probably, and they're going to make a Zootopia 3. I would imagine it's going to follow a similar formula of the detective kind of story that follows similar beats to the first movie. Again, not exactly, right? There are some key differences, but, it's following a general scheme, I should say. And it works, right? It's a fun movie. It's also very engaging. The animation's great. It's the kind of movie that I think kids and adults can both enjoy. Not in the same kind of Pixar way, although I'm not going to say that this is just a shallow animated movie that's entertaining enough for adults to watch. I think that actually one of the fascinating things about Zootopia, and now Zootopia 2, is that they, not so subtly actually, deal with some very interesting and adult themes. Like in this movie, and not to spoil anything that's not been in the trailers already, but it's been all over the marketing, this movie deals with these reptiles, right? The snake voiced by Ki Hee Kwan, and how he's perceived to be different from the rest of the animals in Zootopia. And there is actually a pretty strong undercurrent in this movie, thematically. Again, I think it's right there. This is not reading into a movie just for the sake of it, but I really think the movie is talking about things like discrimination, things like othering, things like treating people that are different from you wrong, and polarization even, and things like having conversations with people who are different from you. I think the movie is really wanting to have those discussions. And if you're sitting there and if you take your kids to Zootopia 2, it has so much flash to it and it's fast paced, and there are action scenes and things like that are really well animated and well shot, that I think kids of all ages are going to be very entertained by this movie. But also for an adult, there are things along the way that you're going, oh, yeah, and actually there are things in this movie also about trauma and feelings and emotions and things like that. So there are a lot of things in Zootopia 2 that I think you play for different audiences, right? Again, I don't necessarily think this is my favorite Disney animated franchise of all time, but I think it's so solid. And it, when you're watching the movie, I will say, I think the ending of the movie got a little bit too chaotic for me. I think they were trying to go somewhere with it, and then they just it just got a little too jumbled by the end of it. But by that point, you're along for the ride and you're enjoying it. And I really found myself to be having a good time by the time Zootopia 2 ends. So yeah, is it as good as the first movie? I feel like everyone wants to ask that question every single time a sequel comes out. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to compare these two movies because they feel so similar to me, which honestly, I don't think is a bad thing at all. I think just making these movies in this vein and having these movies be what they are, which is just a fun adventure in a Disney animated world of Zootopia, which is very original and very fun, and the Easter eggs and little clever hints and nods that they put in the movie are also really fun to spot as well. And there's deeper themes, but there's also just fun action, and there's a fun mystery to solve generally. I think, as you're watching the movie, you can kind of follow along and see what's going on here. And you can at least kind of guess at what the ending is going to be. At least I did. But again, it's not supposed to be a Knives Out movie, right? You're supposed to just kind of enjoy it and go along for the ride. And in that vein, I really did. So Zootopia 2, well, I again, in a vacuum, if I hadn't known about Zootopia 1 making $1 billion, would I have thought that this movie was going to be the second in the franchise to probably, hasn't yet as of the recording of this segment, but probably cross the $1 billion mark again? Would I have thought that this was going to be the franchise that just consistently churns out $1 billion movies? No, not at all. I think that there is a lot of appeal to the franchise, but it certainly wouldn't have been at the top of my list. But I really enjoy these movies, and I'm glad that I'm glad that Disney is making them. I think Ke Huy Quan did a great job voicing the snake. I think all the voice actors did a great job, and there's some surprises in here as well, in terms of the cast and things like that. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed the movie. And if you haven't checked out Zootopia 2, you like Zootopia 1, I feel like it's pretty much in the same ballpark, and you're going to enjoy it. So those are some of my quick non-spoiler thoughts here. Let's dive into some spoilers really, really quickly. There's not a whole lot to quote unquote spoil in this movie. It's a fun movie, but not a whole lot to spoil. But we'll talk about a couple things here. So I've been vamping for just a second. If you haven't seen the movie, then make sure to save the second for later, and let's dive into it. So at a certain point, right? Because I'm watching this movie and going, so are they going to follow a similar twist? Character that we think we can trust turns out to be the villain. And as we were getting to the end of it, I was like, maybe not. Maybe they're going to go somewhere else. And then it turns out that Andy Samberg's character, who, by the way, fun surprise, I didn't know Andy Samberg was in the movie at all. Hobart was his name. It turns out he's the villain. And it's like, or he's one of the villains. Because, you're kind of thinking, oh, is it just going to be the Link Sleeves? Are they just going to be generic villains? Which is fine. It's totally fine, by the way. Not every Zootopia movie, although maybe in this franchise, but, not every animated movie, not every story needs to have a twist or anything like that. But I kind of thought, it would be obvious. Like the two obvious, answers, I guess, would be Gary, the snake, right, would be the villain of the movie in disguise, or secretly the villain, or it would be Poppert. And I was like, it's probably Poppert, because making Gary the villain after going through all that work of showing that snakes aren't the real bad guys would be kind of a weird message to send to audiences, I think. There's a way to thread that needle, I guess, of showing complexity in people, but, I think it made a lot more sense that it was Poppert. So I was kind of following along there. But again, I really enjoyed the relationship between Hops and Wild. I think that their little heart-to-heart at the end was cute until they started to go, and I know they made fun of it in the movie, but just because, I always say this, just because you're self-referential doesn't necessarily mean that it excuses anything. Not that it was egregious, but as they kept going on with their back and forth, I was like, okay, yeah, so we're kind of letting out all their feelings here, which is fine. It's totally fine. It's a kids movie. It's not meant to be this Oscar drama or anything like that. And again, I think the ending was a bit chaotic with all the fighting going on top of the snow cliffs and things like that. It's fine. It's Zootopia. This is not going to be in my top 5 favorite movies of the year, frankly. But it's just a solid movie that I will look back on 2025 and think, oh yeah, as I look back on the list of movies I watched, I'm like, yeah, that's a movie that I definitely enjoyed, and I think that there's something to that. Again, these movies making billions of dollars, I don't know if I quite understand that, but that's okay. I don't have to. People enjoy them, and I can bet that they're going to make a third one. So we'll see what happens there. Guys, I'm assuming if you've stuck around to the spoiler discussion, you've seen Zootopia 2. What did you think about it? Did you enjoy it more than the first movie, or did you like the first movie more? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, the show that really became the quintessential satire parody for superhero movies and television shows is coming to an end. The Boys Season 5. It is been 5 seasons, or 4 seasons prior. This is going to be season 5, and 2 seasons of a spin-off show, Gen V, as well as upcoming spin-off shows of Vought Rising, and I think another show, Boys in Mexico, something like that. So the universe will still be will be very much alive, and Gen V season 3, I think, is going to be happening as well. But the main show, the Homelander Butcher show, The Boys Season 5, is coming to an end. And we have our first trailer as well as a release date. So the release date for the first episode, and probably the first few episodes, I think, because usually they do the first 3 episodes in that first week, but I don't know what they're going to do this time around. But that release date is going to be April 8th. That is going to be when The Boys Season 5 is going to premiere. We have our first trailer. And the interesting thing about final seasons, because we are also in the midst of another final season 5, that being Stranger Things, of course. And I think that there are actually some very interesting analogies that we can pull between the two of them. I think when you're entering a final season of a show that's been pretty beloved, right? I think The Boys hasn't been obviously, well, it's definitely not as wide appealing, I suppose, as a show like Stranger Things is. It's very vulgar and graphic in places. But again, I think the story it's very sharp, and it's a very real indictment on things that are going on in the world right now. Not saying that every season or every plot line has been perfect. I think that as the show's gone on, I've generally liked each season a little bit less, I think. Though it's been a while since I've seen the whole season or the whole show in its entirety. But I remember season 4 being pretty good, but a little bit it kind of faltered, I think, towards the end for me. But again, I think that, you're kind of entering this phase now where with season 5 being the final season, just as it is with Stranger Things, I think that you're at an interesting crossroads because now it's almost like all bets are off, right? Because in the previous 4 seasons of both Stranger Things and The Boys, one might be able to say, well, sure, you can have some stakes, right? But I mean, even when spoilers for Stranger Things, not the recent season, but the older seasons. But anyways, when they killed Hopper, quote unquote, in season 3, were they really going to? I mean, it's possible, but then they brought him right back in season 4. And I think that's just because, when you know that is not the final season, when you know that's not the period at the end of the sentence, you know that you have to keep building towards something. So in a similar vein, right, while I think that they've been able to do a lot of really interesting things with these characters, with Butcher, for example, of him taking that temporary compound V and having that tumor weird thing that was at the end of, or during the last season, which was Jeffrey Dean Morgan kind of talking to him in hallucinations, right? And you can have him fight Homelander once in a while. You can never really have that big confrontation because you know that if they have that big confrontation, then something has to give. Well, something finally has to give. And so the reason I gave all this preamble and setup here is because I think you can really tell in this final trailer, or in this trailer for the final season, that this is the season where something has to give. This is the season where, I think Butcher says it, right? We're going to go down swinging. And I think that you can tell in this trailer, finally, the creators of the show, Eric Kripke and the other creators of The Boys, know that this is their last shot at this. This is where the Homelander Butcher confrontation is going to happen. This is where characters' arcs are going to come to an end, right? Even though the universe is going to continue onwards, this is where really the Homelander Butcher arc is going to come to a close, and all bets are off. So I think that's a big part of what you can see in the trailer. I was also curious too. Well, I mean, you see other things in the trailers, but it's a pretty standard teaser trailer of Butcher saying, "Hey, let's go on for one last ride." You see all the members of The Boys, right? So it's pretty standard in that way, and you see all the characters that you expect to see. One thing that I was thinking about though, and looking for in this trailer, because obviously we just recently finished talking about this, is Gen V, right? Because at the end of Gen V season 2, spoilers for that show, we see the members of the kids group, right? So your Maries and your Sam and Kate and all those kids and Emma, right? You see all of them joining this little mini resistance. And so I was curious to see where they're going to feature in this trailer. And as far as I can tell, I don't think they did. So I don't know if that's an intentional choice. I don't know if they have a huge part to play in this season. It seems like they were being set up to have a pretty significant part just based on the end of Gen V season 2, but maybe not, right? Maybe they'll just appear in 5 scenes and that's it. So who knows? But I was looking out for that, and I think very smartly too, because I think, I said this before, I'd be very curious to see how the universes are going to collide, right, with The Boys and Gen V. And I think so far they want to keep this very much The Boys. You see Soldier Boy is back. You see obviously Homelander is at the center of this, and Butcher is giving the monologue, and you see all the other members of The Boys and whatnot. So I think that it's going to be an appropriately all bets are off, the gloves are off kind of season, and I think that is what we've been heading towards for a while. And we'll have to see how that all turns out. So I'm looking forward to it, and the way that, yes, I don't love the violence, I don't love the graphic nature of the show necessarily. It's just not my cup of tea. But I also, I've been very fascinated by the story in general, and just the ways in which, like I said, it reflects both our current political moment, our current societal moment, as well as the current state of superhero movies and shows. Although it's kind of gone away from that a little bit more over the last few seasons, but still, it's been a fun and interesting satire and parody to watch. So we will see how that goes from there, and then we will try to do our reviews and thoughts on The Boys season 5 when that comes out. Guys, what did you think of this first trailer for The Boys season 5? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so we definitely could have made this the topic of last week's segment, or last week's episode, rather. We could have put it in to last week's episode, but this topic deserves to be a headliner because it is massive. Now, if you've been following the Access Blockbusters pod and the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, you might have noticed, right? There is a topic that's going on in the entertainment industry that we have not been talking about. Not because I don't think it's important. Actually, I think it's monumental, what we're about to talk about with Netflix and Warner Brothers. But because I wanted to be able to get to a point where we had a bit more certainty. There were many, times when it looked like it was going to be Paramount, and then it was going to be Netflix and all these different kinds of things. So I think, right, for me, it was important to get to a point where we knew with some certainty, because things are still not final, but it looks like the agreement, at least, is in principle final. I don't know, as the recording of this segment, if there's been a signature on the dotted line, but it looks like this deal, it's like when Disney bought Fox. It was good to go at a certain point during the summer. I think it was 2019, and then they went. So here we go. Again, I could have talked about it last week. It came out the morning of the time when I locked my podcast episode, and I thought about doing a quick segment on it, but I thought, no, this deserves to be a headliner of a podcast episode. It deserves to be the first or the last or the second to last topic of an episode, because it is important. Netflix has reportedly agreed to buy Warner Brothers in an $82.7 billion deal. Now, I want to preface all this by saying, so first of all, we're going to go over some of the details here. I'm reading an article from the Los Angeles Times, and I want to kind of dive into some of the details. Because again, I want to preface this entire discussion by saying, I myself, I'm not an economist. I myself do not have insider knowledge on how mergers work and how acquisitions work in Hollywood. I do not have insight into the ins and outs of this deal. And I am also not, look, I'm going to make some informed opinions. I'm going to tell you what I think just on a base level, but I want to preface all this by saying I myself am still learning about the details. I myself am still curious about all the implications, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about this for many, many, many weeks and months to come. Just want to preface this. But this is you were listening to this probably within the first couple weeks of the merger being announced or the acquisition being announced, and I wanted to give you my thoughts here. So let's read from this Los Angeles Times article just a little bit here, and we will go from there. A couple things, right? So baseline, Netflix has agreed to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery for $72 billion. And that's off from the number that we said in the headline, $82.7 billion. That extra $10 million is apparently debt that Warner Brothers has accumulated. And so the entire deal is $82.7 billion. This includes HBO. This includes, obviously, Warner Brothers. This includes DC. This includes Harry Potter, Friends, Batman, all of these different things, Game of Thrones, all of these properties. It is tantamount to when Disney bought Fox, acquired Avatar, acquired X-Men, right? Even though there were other major implications for that, what we were looking at as Marvel fans is obviously X-Men, right? Netflix doesn't have that exact same scenario, right? But it's still monumental that now Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are going to be under Netflix. What this means for their theatrical models, we'll talk about in just a second. We obviously will still be learning a lot about this as the weeks and months go on. Is the Batman Part 2 just going to release on Netflix? I don't think so. However, is the Batman Part 3 or 4 going to release on Netflix? Well, we'll talk about that. We don't know, but we'll talk about that. Ted Sarandos is the co-chief executive of Netflix, and he had this to say about the deal. Quote, Warner Brothers has some of the best entertainment in the world. He says, the combination of Netflix and Warner Brothers creates a better Netflix for the long term. It sets up for success for decades to come. So make no mistake, you read it in that quote, right? This is not, and I said merger incidentally, it's not a merger. It's an acquisition. Netflix is buying Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers is going to fall under the umbrella of Netflix. So again, without going into the nitty-gritty of the financials, because you can check out plenty of channels and articles. There are tons of news sources, the big major, and we're not talking about Hollywood Reporter and Deadline, though of course they're reporting on this. We're talking about Los Angeles Times, New York Times, CNN. They're all reporting on this. So you can go check out a lot of financial analysis on that if you are so inclined. Obviously, though, for us, what we are perhaps a little more concerned about is what happens to the theatrical model with Warner Brothers, what happens to DC, and is this a good thing in general that this is happening? First of all, let's talk about the theatrical model. So what I've read, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've read is that the theatrical model is here to stay at the very least. So as it exists with Warner Brothers, it's here to stay at least through the existing contracts. So that means current films that have been, I guess, greenlit or in pre-production or in production will still be heading to theaters in a normal fashion, I should say. However, this is a quote that I'm reading from the direct that Ted Sarandos gave. And he says this, quote, my pushback, when he's talking about the theatrical window, he says, my pushback has been mostly in the fact of the long exclusive windows, which we don't really think are that consumer friendly. Okay, more on that in a second. So based on what I'm hearing, and just based on my understanding of the situation, Man of Tomorrow, for just as an example, in 2027, I think will still be fine. It'll still release in theaters like normal. In fact, we probably won't be seeing the ramifications of this for quite a while now. Quite a while. Like, again, Batman Part 2 in 2027, probably fine. The Batman Part 3, whenever that comes out, and at this rate, 2035 or whatever, I don't know. Because that quote to me is a bit concerning, right? The thing that Ted Sarandos is saying is that I don't know if I like the idea of having movies out theatrically for a long time. This is the reason, by the way, why many major theater chains, including AMC and Cinemark, did not show Wake Up Dead Man, which is a Netflix movie. I got to see it in a small independent theater, but the major theater chains were not showing it because the theater chains, rightfully, I think, are not happy with Netflix, based on these comments, because Netflix does not care for the theater business in general, right? They only put movies out in theaters when the creators fight for it, when their contract obligations and things like that. Even the Stranger Things finale, I think was a last second kind of thing, based on what I understand, putting it in theaters. So again, Netflix is not keen on the theatrical model. And what I'm hearing from that one quote from Ted Sarandos is that he would ideally like, if Warner Brothers movies are going to be put in theaters, he would like it to be either a combination Netflix. This is, again, just speculation. I want to put that out there. I'm not quoting anybody. My speculation. But it seems to me that what Ted Sarandos wants to do is have Netflix movies go out into theaters and on Netflix at the same time, or have a very limited kind of Wake Up Dead Man style theatrical run where it goes 2 or 3 weeks and then is on Netflix. And that is, again, detrimental to the theatrical movie-going experience. There are, based on what I'm reading, a lot of antitrust groups and a lot of theater groups that are very unhappy with this deal. And when we ask the question, is this a good thing in general? Again, not an economist, not an expert, but in my personal opinion, no, this is not a good thing. Because, you might be asking, well, why didn't you say the same thing about Fox, right? When Disney bought Fox. And again, even Fox, I would argue, it wouldn't have been a bad thing, right? If Fox had stayed separate from Disney. I think that more competition in this case makes for better quality, makes for more robust theater experiences. If the same 4 studios are putting out all these big movies, then what's the point, right? I mean, I think that it creates less diversity in content. It creates less creative storytelling. So on the base level, on the creative level alone, that I think just having less diversity in terms of voices is not a good thing for the kinds of movies that we're going to see. But the second thing, economically, is that this is a huge blow, I think, potentially to the theater industry. I think that if the more power that Netflix has, as of the current moment, because they could change their minds, hopefully, and they might be more favorable towards theaters. They might change their minds. But as of right now, they are still, it seems like, posturing towards being against the theatrical window in general, right? And that is not good for theater experiences. I grew up just having some of the best memories that I've had in the theater, in movie theaters, watching movies together with people. I could not imagine watching. Can you imagine if Man of Tomorrow just drops on Netflix, right? They spend all that time. And I'm not saying that Netflix movies are inherently bad. Just because they spend all that time and drop it on Netflix doesn't mean it's a bad movie. Just because they spent all that time on Stranger Things doesn't mean, and they drop it on Netflix because it's a Netflix show, doesn't mean it's a bad show. But there is something, I think, being robbed of us if we cannot experience Man of Tomorrow, the Batman Part 2, etc. in a theater. And so I don't know what this means for theaters in general. I can't imagine, though, that this is a good thing for them. We'll see. Because, again, I wanted to make this segment only once there was some more clarity around the whole situation. And there is now. Things can still change. There are still people opposing this deal. I don't know if the deal has completely gone through. There is, I imagine there will be more segments on this in the coming days and weeks. But again, these are just my initial thoughts about this. It is going to be a fascinating time to see what happens here. And I am just hoping and praying that the theater experience is still intact when this is all said and done. Guys, what do you think of Netflix winning the bidding war and buying Warner Brothers? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, end of 2025. DCU has been over for a few months now after Peacemaker Season 2. Doesn't mean that there isn't stuff to look forward to, because the first trailer for Supergirl, now just called Supergirl, formerly Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Supergirl coming in June 2026. The first trailer has arrived. Let's talk about this teaser trailer. So Supergirl, starring Millie Alcock as Supergirl, aka Kara Zor-El, is going to be directed by Craig Gillespie, who did I, Tonya, and I believe he did Dumb Money, which is that movie about GameStop, which I actually really liked, is doing the movie. Written by Anna Noguera, who seems like she is really one of the favorites at the DCU right now, because I think she's doing Wonder Woman, and she was going to do Teen Titans at a certain point. So again, looks like James Gunn is very happy with her writing. And Supergirl looks like it's going to be adapting. I don't think it's going to be doing a one-for-one adaptation, but adapting Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the Tom King comic book run. Supergirl, obviously, we saw at the end of Superman. She is Superman's cousin. And generally, in her origin stories, she is in recent origin stories, I should say, she sort of sees a different side of humanity, because her origin story is much more tragic than Superman, who was obviously raised by kind and compassionate parents. We saw that in Superman, and I think we're going to see the contrast here in Supergirl. So this Supergirl teaser, I was excited. I was interested in seeing what the trailer had to offer, because I'm excited for Supergirl, but I don't know enough about the character. I don't know enough about the mythology to really have formed an opinion. I haven't seen Millie Alcock. I haven't seen House of the Dragon. So I'm just, I'm assuming she's a great actress, but again, just not quite sure what to make of it. And so heading into this trailer, just wanted to see what they had to offer. And I thought the trailer was good. I liked the trailer. It certainly, for me, didn't blow me away, right? Watching this trailer did not make me go, oh, all of a sudden Supergirl is in my top 2 most anticipated movies of the year. That's fine. It's a first trailer. I think a couple things stood out to me pretty quickly about Supergirl. One that I really liked, and one that makes me go, okay, maybe this movie will have that kind of ceiling that I know, for example, James Gunn's movies or shows kind of do for me as well. I know this is not a James Gunn movie, but interestingly, this trailer gave off some very interesting James Gunn vibes, but we'll talk about that in a second. So one thing I really liked about this trailer, and then we'll talk about the other thing, as well as some other little details here and there. But the thing I really liked, I think when you make Supergirl, because again, you want to, Superman is the titular hero of not just DC, but pretty much the world. He is the superhero. So you have all these super family characters, right? And really, it's not fair to these characters, but you want to make sure that these characters are not derivative, right? You want to make sure that these characters can stand on their own and have something interesting to say for themselves, and not just be carbon copies of Superman, but slightly different, right? And I loved that this trailer really dived into the fact that Superman and Supergirl are going to have very stark differences. You saw a little bit of that at the end of Superman, right? But it seems like this movie is going to very much lean into the fact that this is a very different person, human being, than Superman because of her upbringing. Looks like she saw Krypton, the end of Krypton, and that really changed the way that she sees the world. And the line at the end is great. It's a fantastic line. Superman sees the good in everyone, and I see the truth. So you have these two dueling worldviews of Superman being the optimist, being the compassionate and caring person. Not that Kara Zor-El is not compassionate or caring in her own way, but Superman is the one to save the squirrel, right? He's the one to see the light at the end of every tunnel. Supergirl, it looks like it's going to be seeing everything, at least at the beginning of this movie. We'll see if her character develops throughout the movie. But she's going to be more cynical, right? She's going to be probably seeing the worst in people. And I think that that's a very interesting angle to take. Again, differentiating these characters and making them more interesting in their own way so that when they meet again, there's going to be a very clear and stark difference between them. I think that that's it. And it's also just a really interesting way to take a character that is, again, Superman is all-powerful, pretty much. Not all-powerful, but, very powerful. And he does it, he sees the good in people. What if the same power sets, I'm assuming pretty similar power sets, I don't know too much about the differences between Supergirl and Superman's powers, but I'm assuming they're pretty similar. What do you get when you take that same power set and you put it into somebody who has a different view of people and the world? I think that is something that I really liked about Supergirl in the trailer, and I think that is going to be something that they're going to do really well. So that's what I really liked in general. We're just doing, broad overview. The one thing about this trailer, and it was something I was listening to a couple videos breaking down the trailer, and I think it was New Rockstars that brought this up. This trailer does have a very Guardians of the Galaxy vibe to it, doesn't it? I think so. The music, right? and the kind of space setting, even the visuals are kind of reminiscent of Guardians of the Galaxy, which, again, to some people, that's music to their ears. For me, I'm excited by that, I think. I like the sci-fi space adventures as much as anyone else does. However, and I know this movie is not directed by James Gunn, he didn't write it and anything like that. I get it. Totally get it. It does feel, though, very similar to James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, which I've always said, right? Not just his DCU projects, also his MCU projects. They have a ceiling for me. You know, I enjoy the Guardians films very much. I enjoyed Peacemaker. I enjoyed Superman, right? All of his projects, Guardians films especially in this case, have a ceiling for me in terms of enjoyment. I like them, but I can never get myself to be overjoyed by them, if that makes sense. So I'm watching this trailer and feeling a very similar vibe as well, especially after hearing New Rockstars say that it feels very Guardians. I totally agree with that. And thinking, so far, again, just based on a 2-minute trailer, I can't see myself in love with this movie, right? Again, not having seen the movie. But I can see myself liking this movie very much. It feels very similar to Guardians, but I just don't see the ceiling yet. And again, that is, having seen nothing, and I am very ready to go into this movie and fall in love with it. I would love nothing more than that, but we'll have to see, right? We'll have to see what that looks like. We see Jason Momoa for a split second as Lobo, so that should be exciting. That should be something to look out for as well. And I think, if it's a fun space action adventure, great. I would personally, and this is not just the DCU, I'm not just putting undue expectations on every DC movie. I'm looking for a little bit more than that. I'd be hoping for a little bit more than that in your Supergirls, your Clayfaces, your Spider-Man Brand New Days, Avengers Doomsdays, all the comic book movies. Just hoping for a little bit more. And at this point, then been there, done that, it's fun. I'm not saying that's what the movie's going to be, but I'm just hoping for a little bit more. So those are my initial thoughts on this teaser trailer. Didn't captivate me, didn't love it, liked it, and curious to see more. Guys, what did you make of this first teaser trailer for Supergirl? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 108 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us as always. Look forward to some great episodes for the rest of the year. But for now, guys, thank you so much. On the road to 2,000 subscribers. Make sure to subscribe on your way out. It would mean so much to me. And make sure to check out the audio-only platforms as well, Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts as well. Thank you guys so much for joining us on episode number 108 of the Access Blockbusters Pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.